So let's talk a little bit about some of the details of this that you're hearing about this framework, because we got the press release and it gave a one
Yep.
sentence explanation for all these things they want to do.
Right.
We've had comments from senators, over time, but some of them are conflicting. And honestly, I want to get your understanding of what I think might end up being the actual most controversial thing. It hasn't been talked about as much as like the red flag
Yeah.
provisions, but I think the 18 to 20-year-old background check process, it seems to be there from what the Trace reported and from reading the frameworks, one sentence, it sounds like they're creating a whole new background check process for 18 to 20-year-olds that includes what is effectively a mandatory waiting period, because it has this like 3-day period where the FBI gets to, do a more detailed examination of the juvenile criminal records. Is that in line with what you're hearing?
Yeah, I mean, I think I 100% agree with you that's, and I would even put it a different way. Like, I think it's the most consequential long-term piece of this as well,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
in addition to being controversial. But what's weird, right, is like nobody's really complaining about it. Instead, you're hearing a lot of complaints about how, from the Republican side, about how the red flag grants would work. Republicans, Cornyn, saying, I don't want states that refuse to implement red flag laws to not have access to the money that we're going to provide. And Democrats are trying to say, well, the whole point of this is to incentivize red flag laws. So why are we going to just give people money if they don't implement these? So that's one sticking point we're hearing a lot about. And then the other one is about how do you define a boyfriend or, in a domestic abuser case as it relates to getting barred from buying guns in the background check system. And then then there's this issue, which is just not getting a ton of play. And I agree it's a big deal because it's sort of it doesn't raise the age to buy firearms for these folks, but it does sort of make a middle ground in terms of like, if you're in this age group, you have a new background check process that all of a sudden would magically, under my understanding, change as soon as you turn 21.
Yeah,
and
very odd.
That's very odd, but current law is odd too, right? That the day you turn 18, what you did at 17 doesn't matter anymore. It's, sort of the way it's been talked about on the Hill. And so I don't know what the right thing to do is, but it's a big deal, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the most underreported part of this and the most underdiscussed, because what it does, like, effectively is change the background check system. Now, it only does it for 18 to 20-year-olds, but I think that's, if you're making a whole new background check process, I think it's going to be hard to convince gun rights advocates that isn't going to eventually get expanded to everybody. And so you're kind of slipping in this federal waiting period, is what from what it sounds to me like is, I don't know how much experience you have with the practical side of going through the NICS system to buy a gun. But right now, it's first of all, it's in the name that the intention is for this check to be instantaneous. It's the National Instant Criminal Background Check System, right?
Right.
Now, you can have situations already where you get delayed, and that's the 3-day waiting period, and that's another part of this deal that we can discuss a little bit. But so in theory, it's not always instantaneous for everybody. If you have some sort of, maybe you have a really common name that a criminal also has, and so they have to make sure that you're not that person. You can get delayed for that reason. Maybe there's something, you have an arrest on your record that could include charges that would make you a prohibited person during that period where you're going through the legal system. There's things that already can delay you, but it sounds like what they're doing, and it's hard to know exactly without the text, obviously, but it sounds like they're going to just put everyone 18 to 20 into the delayed process automatically. Like, it doesn't matter if they pass the check, they're getting into that delayed process until the FBI, I guess, reviews their juvenile criminal records, which is another huge.
And it might have to do with what state you're in, right? Like, because there's 50 different state treatments for these juvenile records. And, if a state reacts to this law and makes these things pop up more quickly, maybe the background check and the delay period isn't as long. But the question that I've heard is about functionality. How's this going to work with 50 different states? I mean, you're really creating a new national standard for juvenile criminal and mental records.
That's what I don't get about it, though. just real quick, is like, why aren't they just trying to add? It's I heard Tillis's comments a few days back, where it sounded more like they want to pick a couple of serious offenses, right? I don't know, rape and murder and
abusing animals is one.
Abusing animals, sure,
as well. Yep.
Right. So if you've been convicted of those things as a juvenile, they want to add those records to the background check system. That makes much more sense to me. Like, why not just ask the states to add those records instead of defaulting to putting every 18 to 20-year-old into a special new system for background checks?
Right. I mean, and then that's how does and this will require people far more intelligent than I to assess how the text actually looks. But I think me and you were going to be looking for, when there is text, sort of an explanation of the functionality, what this actually means on a year from now, once this thing's implemented. What does it actually mean if you're 18 years old and you want to buy a gun?
Yeah.
And I think part of the reason they're doing this, right, is the age of some of these mass shooters. And I think, we hear a lot of talk in Washington about actually addressing the problem. I want to do something that actually addresses the problem. And there does seem to be some bipartisan consensus that these folks think this would address the problem. There's like a hunch that the Uvalde shooter would not have been able to buy the gun that he bought. And I don't know that that's actually true. But
I don't think that's
what they're
true.
Reacting to.
Right. And that's the other thing. Like, I get it, because the shooters were Buffalo and Uvalde, they were 18, although obviously not all mass shooters are under the age of 21. So, right. I mean, the obvious question for gun rights proponents is like, what happens when there's a mass shooting perpetrated by somebody who's over 21 years old? Are you just going to expand this system to everybody? Would be the obvious concern.
Yeah.
But yeah, the other thing too is, like, this started coming up, and it was never clear to me. I don't think there's any evidence that the Uvalde shooter was ever actually convicted for any of these things that he did, right? That was the big problem. It's like, like he had warning signs, like most of them do, but nobody followed up on them. And I don't believe he was convicted for his animal abuse or, sentenced to any sort of, I mean, I guess we don't know if his records are sealed, maybe.
Right.
But, so maybe there's
some uncertainty there though, about if this would have actually prevented this particular shooter.
It doesn't seem like it would have, unless somebody has information that he had a juvenile criminal record.
Right.
Which I don't think that's clear at this point.
I just don't know, but I know that the motivation here is because of the age of that particular shooter.
Right.
Is how we ended up in this, instead of 18 to 25 or something, it's 18 to 21.